This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have New York Times bestselling author Anne Hillerman here to discuss her new release, Shadow of the Solstice. Welcome, Anne.
Hello, Maria. Thank you so much for letting me be on your show and talk a little bit about my new baby.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for being on the show and letting me talk to you about your new baby. Before we dig in, I'm trying to contain and not fangirl all over you right now, okay? So I'll warn you in advance. Can you start listeners off with an overview of what the story is about?
Sure, I would be glad to. Shadow of the Solstice actually concerns two stories. Luckily for me, I managed to bring together at the end. And the first story has to do basically with the Navajo Nation's long history with uranium mining and other extraction. There's a cult that comes to the Navajo Nation to celebrate the solstice, and they're all about peace and joy and healing Mother Nature. But then, of course, because it's a mystery, things start to go bad. Bernadette, Manuelito, and Chee get involved in that, and one thing leads to another. I'm not going to say any more about that. And the second story involves Bernie's sister, Darlene Manuelito. And Darlene is working as a home health aide with an elderly woman. And she really loves this woman. And she goes to check on the woman, and the woman is gone. That story then concerns Darlene's real concern about this lady who she likes a lot and how she tracks her down to figure out what's happened to her.
Obviously, you've got these amazing characters that you've grown and that have this wonderful history and this wonderful propulsive arc to them, being Chee and Bernie Manuelito. And you built up a cast that was so compelling. And if we could just start off with, I believe her name is Mrs. Raymond, right? The character
Right.
you're referring to. Where did you get the idea for her? Because she's that amazing, not just grandmother, but woman who's really come into her own as she's gotten older. And the power and wisdom she displays. I'm such a fan of Mrs. Raymond.
You know, I was too. And it was an interesting thing. I created the character of Darlene, more than 10 years ago, when I decided that I could try writing mysteries to continue this wonderful series that my dad had begun back in the 1970s. And I knew that to continue the series, I had to do things that would make it my own. And the first thing that came to me was the character of Bernadette Manuelito, because Dad had created her, but never really used her to full effect. So this is a long answer to your question, but I'm going to get to the point. So anyway, with Bernie, I thought if I'm using her, the readers really don't know her. So I have to give her kind of a backstory. That included giving her a mother who was full of unnecessary advice, and then a younger sister who is trying to find herself, at first she has a drinking problem. She wants to be an artist. Then she switches to video. For the last 8 books, Darlene, Bernie's sister, had been telling me, I'm growing up and I'm ready you can treat me like an adult now and all of this stuff. So when it came to writing Shadow of the Solstice, initially I was going to give Darlene just a little bigger role. But then I came up with this Mrs. Raymond, and Darlene is working with Mrs. Raymond. And then Mrs. Raymond just kind of took over that whole part of the story. I think one thing that inspired her was the time I had spent on the Navajo Nation with such wonderful, wonderful Navajo elders. I mean, women in their 80s and 90s whose brains are still sharp as can be and who don't hesitate to tell you what they think and how they feel and to give you advice, whether you ask for it or not. And I admire this. Like you said, people coming into their power. So when I came up with the idea of Mrs. Raymond, I didn't really envision her as a person with quite so much power. But as the story developed, there she was. And I just let her run with it. And I really, really enjoyed writing that part of the story. And a lot of readers, just like you, have said that they enjoyed her too. So I think we're kind of forming a little mutual admiration society for Mrs. Raymond here.
I loved it on so many levels because women having voices, and there's that whole dynamic in society where, and you see it lots of times, unfortunately, in Hollywood. And I think that's one of the best examples where females are a little more expendable in the marketplace, right? They hit a certain age and then they become a little invisible to everyone. And Mrs. Raymond stood her ground and she owns her space. And thank God for Mrs. Raymond.
And women like her everywhere. Yes.
I loved you putting her with Darlene, like you said, because Darlene is trying to come into her own, and having that kind of woman to lead and guide her as an example. And I loved it.
And the other thing that was, for me, was kind of bittersweet. As I mentioned earlier, I created Darlene and Bernadette, Manuelito's mother. And through the series, she has been steadily declining. So in Shadow of the Solstice, Bernadette's mother and Darlene's mother really needs a lot of care and a lot of attention. So it was really a joy for me to have Mama on one side and then to have Mrs. Raymond on the other side as kind of the contrast of how aging can be, and how, you never know what's going to happen. And you just have to be prepared to say thank you, I guess, to whatever you get as you get older, and as parents and people we love get older.
One of the beautiful things that had me on the floor through this book, when you talk about Mama and the way that Bernie and Darlene are interacting with her, there's a scene where one of Bernie's coworkers shows up and he realizes Mama has struggles. And there is this sense, you just weave so beautifully this sense of community and community awareness of issues. The little hairs on my arm stand up is so beautiful, the way that you did that, and really showed that cultural awareness of people and seeing people.
Well, thank you. That character, Roper Black, was another new character. I introduced him in The Way of the Bear. And again, I thought, I need a security guard here. So I came up with Roper. And then, kind of like Mrs. Raymond, he sort of took on a life of his own. So I was really glad in Shadow of the Solstice to be able to give him a bigger role too.
Amazing cast of characters. And then, of course, your setting. Now, in this book, we do get two settings because, like you said, there's two plot lines running concurrently. And we're not just in New Mexico in this story.
For my other 9 books, I started with setting. Then I would think, what would be a logical crime to happen in this setting? But for Shadow of the Solstice, there were 2 real life stories that really caught my attention, that kind of moved me to a different place to start the book. And one was the whole issue of uranium mining. Right when I was trying to come up with a plot line for this book, there was news that a company in Utah was going to reopen a uranium mine on the south side of the Grand Canyon. And that uranium was going to be driven through the Navajo Nation to a milling plant in Utah. As many readers know, the Navajo Nation has a very mixed history with uranium. So the mine was highly controversial. So that kind of gave me the idea of doing something that had to do with the environment. From there, then I thought, well, there is a uranium waste disposal site near the town of Shiprock. So I thought, I love to write about Shiprock. So that would be a good place for one part of the story to develop. And the other story, the Mrs. Raymond story, again was prompted by an article I was reading. And this had to do with Medicaid fraud in Arizona. There were what they call fake sober living homes that were sending vans out to the Navajo Nation, to the Ute people, to Apache people, even to some of our pueblos here in New Mexico. And basically looking for people who were down and out, maybe people just getting out of treatment in a clinic. And the drivers would say to them, hey, why don't you come with me and we'll give you a place to live and we'll give you some food and we'll help you get over your alcohol or drug addiction. Many of these people said sure, and they got in the vans. And when they got to the usually suburbs of Phoenix, where these charlatans were operating, what they got, they did get a little housing and a little food, but they didn't get any treatment. And eventually they thought, gee, I miss my family. And here I am in Phoenix and it's 115 degrees and I want to go home. And they didn't have any cell phones and they didn't have any transportation. And when they complained to the people operating these homes, either the people just locked them in and gave them more booze and drugs, or they said, okay, and just sent them out on the streets. Well, a lot of the Navajo families talked to the Navajo police and they said, you know, my Uncle Leroy, my cousin, my nephew, my grandpa, you know, he called me. He was so happy. He was, you know, going to rehab in Arizona, and I haven't heard from him. And so then the Navajo police started something called Operation Rainbow Bridge. And they worked with law enforcement in Phoenix to help bring back some of these families. So that was the story that was going on in my brain when I was thinking of Shadow of the Solstice. And so the setting for that story, I mean, that starts kind of in Shiprock or outside of Shiprock where Darlene lives. But then I was able to take them on the road all the way to Phoenix. So yeah, it's a different settings than I've usually used. And it's fun to do something different. That's one of the things I really like about my career, being able to write mysteries.
It was so fun for the readers, yet also so heart-wrenching, because really at the core of these two plot lines, there's one theme kind of in both, which is exploitation, whether it's exploitation of natural resources or exploitation of human beings. And that ties to the very complicated history that the Navajo have had with the United States and even with the state that they're in New Mexico. And it was such a brilliant way to get us to think about these things and to realize that sadly, it's not stopping.
Well, thank you for saying that. And you know, the other thing, I like to write stories that kind of end on a high note. And so the other thing about both of those stories, that in the end, the thing that really makes a difference is the power of community. You know, I don't want to give too much away, but in the story about the cult and the natural resources, a lot of terrible things happen. But in the end, the people who are there kind of realize that they don't have to be victims. But the people themselves realize that they can be together as kind of an improvised family, but they can do good for each other. And the same thing in the Mrs. Raymond story. Again, it's the will of those families wanting their relatives to come back, and the good-heartedness of the Navajo Police Department. Basically, I like to end stories that give people a little dash of hope.
There was a lot of hope. And the beauty of it as well was that Chee and Manuelito, their jobs are so darn important. Unfortunately, there's always stories in the news. And sometimes we think, oh my goodness, there's law enforcement who's doing this or doing that. But to see these stories of folks who are in it for the right reasons and who do see it as a community service and they see the people first is just such a wonderful story of hope in these characters.
Well, thanks. I mean, I believe there's so much negativity out there that I know as a reader, when I'm reading something, you know, I like tension and I like drama, but I like it to end with with goodness prevailing and justice being served. I guess maybe that's an old-fashioned way to look at books, but as a reader, that's what I enjoy. So I think maybe that's what my readers enjoy too.
Well, I totally enjoy it. And I have to say, as your reader in this case, I am grateful that you give us stories like that because there's so much going on in the world. There's so many reasons to not sleep at night. But when you give us hope and you give us the idea of justice and that it can be seen, it makes us think, wow, I can go to sleep. It'll be okay. There's good people out there. It'll be okay.
I like thinking that too. And I think the world has all these sides and it's just up to us to pick which one we want to live in. Some people might say it's wishful thinking, but it gets me through the day. So that's all I need, really.
I agree with you 100%. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about how did you balance between the plots so well? Because we would get a piece of what was going on in Phoenix, and then we're back in New Mexico, and you gave us exactly the right amount each time. How did you know, okay, this is how much time I need to devote to Phoenix, and now I need to give New Mexico this much time?
Oh my goodness. That was such a challenge for me. I'm lucky to have a good editor at Harper who helped me with this. And then especially to have a good freelance editor who had worked with me before and who knew the Navajo Nation and kind of knew my idiosyncrasies. Some of it I think was intuition and some of it was hard work and some of it was probably just luck. The other thing that helped me, I have some what I call beta readers, people who know about law enforcement, say know about cults and how they work, people who are experts sort of in the areas in which I'm working. And when I get what I think is probably a pretty solid draft, I let them take a look at it. And often the advice they give me is just so valuable. And sometimes even all they say is, this, I didn't understand this, or this was more than I needed to know about something. That really helps me just in terms of looking at that section again and trying to make it better. In Shadow of the Solstice, one thing that my editor said, and I don't know why I hadn't thought of this, was why don't you use the idea of the solstice itself to tie these two stories together? Because you're alluding to it all the way through. Just bring it more to the foreground. And I thought, yeah, that's right. So anyway, that was such a wonderful gift to have her suggest that to me.
So one thing I do want to ask you about, have you been to Chaco Canyon?
I have. It's fabulous. Have you ever been?
I have never been, but because of your book, I have it on my list. I talked to my husband about it. I said, we need to go see this.
You need to go. You need to go. It's really best to not go. I mean, it's lovely to be there for the summer solstice or the winter solstice, but also that's when the most crowds are. And the summer solstice is also when it's really, really hot. So I would say to go in the spring or the fall is really a wonderful time. But anytime you go, it's wonderful. It's just so full of history and of all kinds of natural mysteries too. So,
and that's one of the things I love about your books. I think that Chee says it at one point when he's talking about a character named Mrs. Yazzie. And he talks about how he and Bernie have seen things in their lives and they understand and they go back to the old ways of spirituality and they see the world with those undertones. And I thought that was so beautiful how you described that.
Thanks. I pick that up so often from my Navajo friends and contacts. And it seems like it just kind of helps people, going back to what we were saying earlier, helps people not worry so much. If you figure there is some kind of a larger plan of which we're all part. And since we don't see the whole thing, we just need to focus on what we can see, which is being kind to people we love as one of the guidelines for that.
Well, I absolutely loved it. There's a lot of heavy things that you're talking about in this book, but again, those extremely powerful undercurrents of hope and faith are so beautifully woven into it. One of the things, of course, because I said I was not going to fangirl on you, and I'm really trying to contain. One of the little fangirl questions that's just been brimming under the surface. Could you talk a little bit about your involvement with the show Dark Winds?
Oh, sure. Well, first, I'd like to say I'm really proud of the show. I'm just so delighted to see so many Native actors have a chance to shine, both in the main roles and in all levels, and even backstage. Filming of season 3, and season 4 used interns from the Institute of American Indian Arts to kind of give students an idea of what it was like firsthand to be involved with a movie. And I'm also really happy that they've used a lot of Native writers to help with the scripts. They list me as executive producer, but I have to say the only thing I really produced was just my signature on the contract, saying that they had the right to continue to use the 18 books that my dad wrote about Chee and Joe Leaphorn, and then to use my first 4 books, which raised Bernadette Manuelito to the level in which they're using her in the show, to raise her as a crime solver on the level with Chee and Leaphorn. So all of that, I mean, it really makes me happy. And the fact that they filmed a lot of it in New Mexico and they're using scenes from the Navajo Nation itself, I'm really happy with it. And I'm honored that they picked my stories and Dad's stories as kind of as the inspiration for this series. And they just finished filming season 4, which will be aired in 2026, AMC.
Well, it's absolutely amazing. And we are all grateful to you and your dad for these amazing characters. I was a little curious when I was asking about your involvement because I think it was in the beginning of season 3 that Robert Redford made a cameo. And I was wondering if you ever got on set. And if so, was that one of the times you got on set?
Well, I wasn't there when Robert Redford and George R.R. Martin did that cameo. But yeah, they've invited me several times to come and watch the filming. I got to watch them filming the very last episode of season 3, which was Bernadette Manuelito has been serving on the Border Patrol, and she comes back to Navajo land, and Chee is there taking care of her horses. And I have to say, it made me really glad that I was writing books instead of doing movies. My husband and I were there. We were on set for probably 2 hours, maybe longer than that. And in the end, the scene that we saw was less than a minute. And I'm thinking, I mean, it was one of those things where, the wind came up, the horses didn't cooperate, the car didn't start. Just a lot of little things, went wrong where they had to shoot it over and over and over again. Whereas when you're writing, sometimes things go wrong, but you don't have to worry about live horses misbehaving or live wind screwing things up. Basically you create your own problems as a writer. So it made me glad that the problems I had to deal with were a little more in my control rather than all of the things that those movie people have to deal with.
Well, that's a great perspective. We're all sitting there at our laptop thinking, well, gee, this plot point's really hard. Hey, at least the horses aren't, at least the horses are cooperating. Wherever I put them, they're there.
Right. We're not dealing with horse poop.
No. Well, and one other quick question for you. What makes you the happiest when you're not writing? Is it your pets? Is it travel? Is it, I know you work with that literacy group as well. What's the thing that sets your heart on fire?
Oh my gosh, what a hard question that is. It kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. I've just been rereading one of James Lee Burke's earlier books, and his description of Louisiana swampland, it's like you're really there on the spot. And so that sets my heart on fire. I've been in Santa Fe all summer, and gosh, I have a front porch that has a wonderful view of the Ortiz Mountains. And just sitting there with a cold drink, watching the clouds move, watching the sunset. I have a bird bath right outside the window, and sometimes scrub jays will come. And there's hummingbirds around, listening to the owls as they are gearing up and the nighthawks. Oh, and spending time with my family, of course. I have a granddaughter who's 9. And she was telling me that she's the best reader in her class. And of course, that makes me really, really happy.
Oh, that is absolutely beautiful. Well, surrounded with all of those beautiful, simple forms of happiness, I see why you're able to weave such magic for the rest of us. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for this incredible read. Now, you have fans all over, fans who adore your books, fans who adore TV adaptations of your work. Where is the best place for folks to find you and find out what's coming next?
They can look on my website. I have my pending talks listed there. I'm going to be in California in September doing a little talk for a literacy group that does scholarships for high school kids. And also on Facebook, I have a wonderful lady who helps me keep up with Facebook. So either of those would be fine. The website is just myname.com. Facebook is Anne Hillerman Author.
Thank you again, Anne. This has been absolutely a dream come true getting to chat with you.
Oh, well, thank you for your lovely questions. It's been a pleasure for me too.
You're welcome. And again, this phenomenal read is Shadow of the Solstice. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.